Hey everyone, welcome to the Policy Pod, and today we're diving into two hot topics in government that have been stirring up debates and popping up in headlines all around the country: education and criminal justice. A real barn burner, I should say. These two issues have been nothing short of the hubbub of the public eye, drawing in strong opinions from all sides of the political spectrum. Now, to get this rolling, let's talk about education, specifically a new reform out of Texas called the House Bill 1481 that is absolutely changing the way schools operate. As the next school year ramps up, this law has already begun to change classroom rules and brought up many real concerns about the role of technology in education. Furthermore, the student safety that comes from having a device to begin with. Well, what is this? What is House Bill 1481? This bill restricts access to technology for students during instructional time. This bill requires devices to be turned off and kept away throughout the day, and it's dependent upon the school and how these rules are established and enforced, meaning they have direct authority to make these rules more strict. Furthermore, they actually have a deadline for when these policies are supposed to be in place for each school. September 18, 2025 is the deadline given for all districts. And before I give myself a chance to feel bad for people falling victim to this bill, let's go over what supporters think. Well, supporters of this bill believe it'll help students stay focused, it'll minimize distractions, and they also argue that limiting device usage would limit the ability for students to cheat and overall encourage more effort into schoolwork. There are many sides of this coin, and it's a very complicated issue. When I was younger and in school, I had my phone to talk to parents, right? So is this bill overstepping on students' liberties, or merely trying to discipline students?
Continuing the conversation regarding education, now, while Joseph gave us a great look on how House Bill 1481 aims to improve classroom focus by restricting personal device use, it's also worth asking, what are we giving up for that focus? The United States has had long struggles and issues with school violence, including not just shootings, but also school fights, particularly in marginalized communities. So, here's the question. In the event of a school emergency, who gets to call for help? Who can contact their loved ones, and who can alert others happening in real time? This isn't about distractions or discipline. It can also be about safety and survival. During critical situations, parents understandably want to immediately contact their children, and if students aren't allowed access to their phones, it raises serious concerns. But this debate doesn't stop at the classroom door. It connects directly to larger issues in our criminal justice system. So let's talk about that. When we think about school safety, we also must examine how institutions respond to threats, who gets criminalized, and whether justice is applied fairly and consistently within students and safety and staff. So in the second segment, we're shifting focus to the criminal justice system, looking at reform efforts and how they intersect with education. From the role of school resource officers, SROs, to how juvenile offenses are handled, to whether our system leans more towards punishment or rehabilitation. This is a deeply layered and emotional topic. Across Texas and the country, we've seen rising presence of SROs in schools, may that be in comics, TV shows, or in day-to-day events. These law enforcement officers are meant to promote safety, but for many students, especially in low-income schools, their presence can feel more like surveillance than protection. What might be seen as discipline in one school can be treated as a criminal offense in another. This connects to a larger issue known as school-to-prison pipeline, where harsh disciplinary practices or increased policing in schools contribute to punishing students, especially students of color, out of the classroom and into the justice system. You've probably heard the phrase, quote, "Your future is based on your zip code." It's unsettling, but true. And when schools in lower income areas are filled with officers instead of counselors, it reinforces that narrative. So, therefore, what's the big question? Are we truly creating safe environments in our schools? And most importantly, who gets to define safety? Can you continue the conversation, Javier?
Absolutely. Now, both Sophia and Joseph have given us their peace of mind to both the education and the criminal justice institutions. Even though these topics can be a bit, quote-unquote, controversial to some people listening, there have been some positive and negatives of both institutions. Will these institutions change their ways? We'll never know. But we can foreshadow and predict some options. So now I'll be talking to you guys about what's working, what's failing, and what change might look like between both institutions. Now, when it comes to the education system, an example of what's working in Texas is that in many high schools, they're offering the early college programs, which allow students to get a head start into their college education and have a chance to graduate not only with a high school diploma, but also with an associate's degree. And once they hit the university, basics would be complete and you'd be on track to finishing a college degree on time. Here in El Paso, in the Socorro Independent School District, or SISD, they offer the early college programs to all their high schools, minus one school. This is a great sign and opportunity for students because not only they will be able to take college courses, but they will also be able to live the high school dream or nightmare, they decide. Now, even though this looks good on paper to many districts across Texas, unfortunately, there are cracks in the system, especially when it comes to standardized testing. Instead of old school teachings when a teacher was open to use their own strategies and ideas to help make their students successful. Well, in this generation of learning, teachers, instead of, being creative and given freedom, well, they are now required to, strictly follow protocols, and they have to do a certain amount of trainings to prepare and stress out their students in taking a test, which is basically meant for students to fail. And that test that I'm talking about, well, is the STAR test. But what could change soon is that, there have been many rumors, going back since 2022 that's saying that they were going to get rid of the STAR test, this and that. Well, now here in 2025, there was actually some statements saying that, the Texas lawmakers, wanted to come up with ideas to ultimately remove the STAR test and possibly come up with a different test. So, back then before the STAR, there was the TOS and then there was the TAKS. But then now just completely trying to remove, this test. Now, the problem with that is that it's very unlikely that there will be any change. But, here in Texas, only time will tell. Now, as far as, criminal justice system, people might think, the institution is broken, this and that. But there has been some positive things. Such things like, as, well, some reform leaderships. So, in Texas, it's been a surprising leader in certain bipartisan criminal justice reforms, especially, since 2007, especially coming with the Texas model, which includes, expanding treatment programs for drug offenders and also investing in diversion rather than building new prisons, which is great because in Texas, they'll be able to save billions and billions of dollars. And these programs like the drug courts, mental health courts, and reentry initiatives, these will help reduce the fact that people have a chance in the real world and not just send them straight to prison. So this will actually help them save money. Well, and then another good thing is that about juvenile justice reform. So, over the last decade, Texas has made significant efforts to reduce, juvenile incarcerations. Obviously, we still follow, Texas is a death penalty state, but, many youth detention facilities, were closed, and then now the focus has shifted, to community-based alternatives, which is good, but this makes Texas slightly better on what they're doing, but there are, some current challenges like mass incarceration. Like I said earlier, the death penalty is still being practiced, and the cash bail system. But I think, the thing that kind of concerns me the most is with all the school shootings that have been happening, especially what happened in Uvalde and also the Walmart shooting. When it comes to, gun control and everything else, it's a very touchy topic because then people will start talking about the Second Amendment, this and that. And, over that sort of situation, yes, there has to be something done about it, but also you have to, you can't be too conservative, but also you can't be too liberalistic. So you kind of have to be in the middle, which is why it's kind of very common plus, over policing and racism, it's all the good stuff. But now, as far as possible changes that could happen, maybe the death penalty, it'll have like, a temporary moratorium on executions. Maybe the reentry support will, which will improve the housing and employment and the education support. Maybe that will work. But, like I said about, the education system, only time will tell. Now, are these changes, could be impossible? Maybe. We don't know. But there is, there are some things that, that can happen. And, everything, people do, everything's bigger here in Texas. But we can only just hope for the best. And, as far as, this is going and this podcast, I want to thank everyone who listened to this podcast. I want to thank my classmates with this podcast. And this is Joseph, this is Sophia, and I'm Javier. And we are signing off. Everyone have a good day.